Hey everyone, this is Neoncast 10. Took a couple of weeks off again, and I think I'm going to do this again. So this is turning into like a bi-weekly affair. Hopefully not forever. Just kind of busy with things. But yeah, since last episode, Batman v Superman has managed to kind of take a giant nosedive in the box office. The production's whole narrative about how it's like, oh, the critics hate us, but the audience loves us is kind of crashing and burning a little bit. And I'm kind of happy that it is, because I thought it was a really dumb spin. And instead of, look, I don't expect a company like WB to come out and say, oh, we were wrong. But their hubristic attitude, I think, is biting them in the ass a little, and I think they deserve it. They're also like playing it up like, oh, we don't care. We made plenty of money, which is not true. It's not doing very well. It had a huge opening weekend, but then it lost like 70% second weekend and seems to be on the way to it's not going to make as much money as Deadpool made domestically, which is just insane. And I'm sure they're not happy. But instead of even mildly signaling, saying like, look, we're happy with where we are, but we are listening to fan feedback. We're not going to ignore our fans and stuff. They're just, powering through, unless this is just their public spin. And like behind the scenes, they're kind of furiously trying to readjust. For instance, another thing that happened since last episode was that it was announced that Suicide Squad was having sort of extensive reshoots because the trailer that came out that everybody loved, the one that had Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, was kind of very funny, and it had that sort of edgy humor to it. And apparently that's not the tone of the movie at all. I think one of the quotes was like, every joke in the movie was in that trailer. But people responded so well to it, they decided they were going to go do some reshoots to maybe adjust the tone of the movie a little. So that's, for instance, that's a good example of them listening to audiences. I'm a little worried about that because it just means that it's this whole like dour tone. Look, I like the idea of a comic book universe that plays it very straight, but they don't seem to be doing it very well. It's a tone that you need to understand in order to pull off. You can't just wing it. So yeah, it remains to be seen. I don't know what's going to happen with Suicide Squad. I hope these reshoots end up being like a blessing. I certainly hope. Time will tell. But yeah, so Batman v Superman, as I said, took a huge nosedive, and I haven't seen this weekend's numbers yet, but I don't think it's going to be doing very well. The big piece of geek news that happened recently was finally they released the first teaser trailer for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, or whatever the tagline is. And it caused a bit of a shitstorm that I don't think I'm going to really get into, because, as I said, I don't want to talk about politics. I'm also on the maybe unexpected side of this one. I'll touch on it a little bit. But first, let's actually talk about the teaser itself. I thought it was really cool. I won't say that I was blown away. I'll say that I thought it was solid. It was interesting. I loved how retro it feels with the old blasters, the old uniforms. It's obviously supposed to be taking place right before A New Hope. Mon Mothma is there, and perhaps other sort of side characters in the rebellion are going to make appearances. We know Darth Vader's in it, and then there's some rumors about other characters who might be making cameos as well. But it still hasn't shown us the more war movie aspect of it. There's a couple of shots that maybe look like that's where this is going. They're storming some kind of beach and there's AT-ATs on it. Really like that shot. But we still don't really know. Also, I think I spoke about this last week where Disney had a bunch of different trailers that showed different tones of the movie because it's, no movie has a completely uniform tone, or I mean, I'm sure there is, but for the most part, some movies have a little bit of levity, a little bit of action, especially Star Wars has that kind of contrast going on. So they highlight different elements of it in different trailers, and it came out that they had like 3 or 4, and they were just kind of trying to decide which one to release first, and I guess this is that one. But yeah, still a little bit vague, not too much info out there, which I certainly don't mind. And as I said, I'm one of those people who like the idea of a non-Skywalker-centric Star Wars movie and also a non-Force-centric Star Wars movie. I mean, especially this conflict, the rebellion's conflict against the Empire, was a largely military conflict. It was, for the most part, a bunch of soldiers fighting against a bunch of soldiers. There's no real Jedi. The Clone Wars were fought by many, many Jedi as well. Or, I mean, they participated in it. But this conflict was largely regular military. And yet our experiences with it through the original trilogy of movies were very Jedi oriented. Darth Vader, the main villain, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, Yoda, who are essentially the only Force users left, or the only Jedi / Sith, whatever, left in the entire galaxy. And there are characters, but aside from them, there's the Battle of Hoth, and you got your different Death Star attacks and Battle of Endor. Like, all of that stuff is just like a war. And I am very excited about that element of it. Just having some, people shooting at people and explosions, and I think there's enough. This universe is expansive enough to be able to deal with both those things. To have movies and subplots that are about the Force and about the Jedi, and also ones about the greater conflict and stuff of that nature. I also know I'm not a big EU extended universe person, but I do know that there's other people who are like Force sensitive, Force users who aren't Jedi. The Jedi is just an order. It's not being able to use the Force does not instantly make you a Jedi. I also think it was kind of implied that Maz Kanata in The Force Awakens had some kind of connection to the Force, and she isn't a Jedi. She's just a whatever. And I also think this Rogue One opens up an interesting avenue of storytelling, because if these characters are popular and interesting, if they resonate with people, this can open up a whole tangent of the Star Wars universe, because all of these characters, Jen Asa, who's the main character, and then all of the other ones, what happens to them then later during the original trilogy, after the original trilogy, and the events leading up to The Force Awakens, it can go off on this whole parallel avenue of storytelling, just kind of like the book Ender's Game and its sequels. There is a parallel storyline to that called Ender's Shadow, which is about a different character from the Ender's Game novel, Bean, and then the Ender plot goes down some thread, and the Bean plot line goes down another thread, and for a short while they're concurrent, and then they each go off on their own thing. So we don't know. This could spawn its own whole, mega arc of other movies and like a long plot. So that should be interesting to see how it pans out. And just definitely interested in seeing where that goes. And just briefly, I'll touch on this because I can't ignore it because it was a big thing. Sadly, everything now is about politics, especially in geek culture. The culture wars, as other people call them, and I do too, seem to be increasing in volume every time a sort of a beloved franchise like this has another iteration. It happened recently with the Ghostbusters remake, and it also, to a certain extent, happened with The Force Awakens, and now with Rogue One. Complaints about political narratives or supposed political narratives that are either being pushed or not pushed by these movies. Are they too women-centric? Are they too minority-centric? Some people are angry about it. Some people aren't angry about it, but are angry that other people claim that they're angry. So sometimes people won't even complain, but then the people who like this will say that they're complaining, which then triggers a whole other fight. I mean, I remember this leading up to The Force Awakens. There was the whole, when the first teaser came out, there was this whole, black stormtrooper controversy. Now, I saw a lot of people say that there was outrage about it. I didn't really see any outrage about it. So it was almost like a big fight was started without anyone having initiated it. It's not that there was this huge movement of people saying, like, how can you have a black stormtrooper? I saw a few people joke about it. I didn't really see any, like, legitimate concerns. But then there was a whole slew of articles claiming that that had happened, which then kind of spurred a fight. And here, something somewhat similar happened. I will give, quote unquote, credit where it's due, and I will say that I did see people who were upset that the protagonist of this movie is also a woman, after the protagonist of The Force Awakens, Rey, was a woman. And people worried or afraid that that Star Wars is now trying to push some kind of social agenda. I'll say that I often find myself on that side of this larger culture war. In this case, I don't see it. I didn't see it in The Force Awakens, and I don't see it here. I've said this before on this podcast and elsewhere. My philosophy about these things is just make them good. I don't care if you make reboots or remakes or reimaginings or re-envisionings, make as many sequels and as many adaptations as you want and have them star women or minorities or whatever. I honestly don't care. Just make it good. The only thing that ever bothers me in the realm of like politics in fiction like that is if it feels forced. If it doesn't make sense, if your character is fleshed out and it's interesting and it makes sense within the context of the story you're telling, I really couldn't care less what politics you have. Look, creators, artistic creators, they have worldviews, they have moral values, and they have social beliefs, and whether consciously or unconsciously, that stuff will find its way into their art. Rarely, if ever, do I think that something is quote unquote propaganda, whether or not it's, SJW or patriarchy or whatever. I rarely think that there's some kind of nefarious, intentional intention to kind of push some kind of agenda. It's usually just the person who's making it says, "Ooh, wouldn't it be great to do such and such, because that's a thing that's close to my heart." And that's, I think, perfectly fine. I honestly do not see, even if J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm have this idea to make Star Wars into a champion of feminism. You know what? Even if that's true, so what? If the movies are good, who gives a shit? Does anybody complain that the Alien franchise is centered around a strong female character? No. Why? Because one, she's awesome. Ripley's fucking awesome. And B, it makes sense. She's an interesting character. You see her progression. She doesn't start out as a complete badass. She kind of evolves into one. And it's it's logical, and she has a really clear story arc. She's not just a kind of a shoehorned in, let's give one to the girls or whatever. And it's not that at all. She's just awesome. Same goes for like Furiosa in Mad Max. She's or the bride in Kill Bill. It's, I was saying to someone, like, just because the main character is a woman, that's not automatic. That doesn't prove that there's any kind of agenda behind it. And frankly, especially in Rogue One, look, it's impossible to tell the characterization of a character just from one teaser trailer. But this character, Jen Asa, she looks like she's this gruff, doesn't give a fuck, kind of rebel, a rogue, if you will. And I honestly felt that if she were a man, it would have been kind of generic. First of all, it would have obviously been compared to Han Solo, but it would also feel a little generic. I mean, how many times have we seen this character? This like, oh, I don't play by anybody's rules. I'm my own boss and whatever. I actually think that's kind of an interesting twist to take that sort of archetype and make it a woman. Whatever. Like I said, I want to try to stay away from this talk because I think it just ruins my fun. I watched the teaser. I thought it was great. And then I saw this whole fight about it, and it started to kind of spoil my fun. And at some point I decided to just back away from it and just try to focus on the fact that I'm excited about this movie and that it doesn't bother me. And yeah, just make it good. That's all. And Gareth Edwards, the guy who's directing this movie, is a good director. And I think the team that's behind Lucasfilm right now is a good team. I think there's a fair chance that this will be a good movie, and that if you're not, searching for something to get annoyed by, it's not going to smack you over the face. And if that's the case, awesome. So yeah, that's Rogue One. And I think what I'm going to do this week, and I know some people who listen to this aren't anime fans, but you know what? I'm not always going to discuss topics that everybody is interested in, and anime is a big passion of mine. I think I'm going to talk about anime. So this winter season of anime, I didn't actually watch too many things, but the spring season looks to be pretty packed with some really good stuff. So I thought I would do a little bit of a review of the shows that I watched, the premieres that I watched over the past week or so, and just talk a little about that and a little about what I'm expecting for this season and stuff. So this winter season was kind of lean for me. I didn't really watch many things. I watched Erased, Bokumachi, which everybody watched, and I watched Dimension W, and I watched Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, which was a holdover from the fall of last year, and I watched Schwarzes Marken, the Muv-Love spinoff, which I kind of half watched. I mean, I watched all the episodes, but I wasn't super into it. And at some point, I just figured I would get through it because I'd watched like half, and I said, whatever, I'll watch it to the end. Hold on, I gotta take a sip. And I actually enjoyed all the shows I watched. Iron-Blooded Orphans also is getting a second season, which I think is super positive. I think it's the pacing of it lends itself to like a 4-core, like 2-season, maybe 50 episodes or more kind of show. It was like a slow burn, but I thought it was really solid. It had some really, really good character development, some really good world building. Not a ton of action and stuff, but just a very good, sort of solid, deliberately paced show. Bokumachi, obviously, I've praised before on here, and I thought Dimension W was pretty good. Not amazing, but just a fun time. From the same creator who made Darker Than Black, which I also liked. And as I said, Schwarzes Marken, I'd call it average. It's all right. It wasn't offensive. It was perfectly fine. So yeah, spring, very, very full of interesting new shows. The most prominent one that I'm not going to be watching is the 4th season of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I'm just not a JoJo person. I watched like the first 2 seasons of it, and I thought it was good. I didn't not like it. I just didn't love it, and I'm having a bit of a hard time understanding the rabid adoration of that franchise. But not in a shitty way. Like, people like what they like. I gotta confess, I don't really get it. I might eventually get to it. That's one of the 2 franchises that I see people just go ape shit over, and I just cannot get into. The other one is Monogatari, which again I watched a bunch of. I got up to 2nd season, and like I watched Neko and the other one. So I watched Bake and Nise and Neko, and I watched like a couple episodes of 2nd season, and I was like, whatever. Like it didn't grab me. Like it had some really good stuff in it, obviously. It's also just beautiful, that whole Shaftism stuff. But frankly I enjoyed Mikaku City Actors more, and I know that's like a Monogat's clone, but it had more of like a plot. And funny enough, like the people who are Monogatari fans didn't like it, and the people who are Kagepuro fans didn't like it either, because it was like a really limited adaptation of a franchise that's really big and has multiple plot lines and whatever. I really liked it. A little more on that later, because there's one of the premieres for this season actually kind of reminded me of that in a really good way. So I just wrote all of the shows that I watched. It's in alphabetical order, I guess, because I wrote it down from AniChart. So whatever, it's not in no particular order. So the first show I watched, again, not in order, but the first show I'll discuss is Bakuon, which is like a motorcycle girl slice of life show. I don't know why I even watched this. I figured I would give it I loved Rolling Girls, which is also a motorcycle show. And also there's a character who's like the Stig in this, who always wears like a helmet and never speaks. And I was like, that's weird. I guess I'll watch this. And you know what? I actually liked it. I thought it was really funny, like really funny, and in a kind of raunchy, edgy way, which I always sort of appreciate. It's obviously it's sort of silly and whatever, but it had some really sort of like genuinely funny moments in it. And just them like snobbishly like arguing about which motorcycles are better and throwing shade at like European manufacturers, because it's obviously Japanese. So they're all like Honda fans, Suzuki fans, and they're like making fun of Ducati. And I thought that was pretty funny. But it's one of those shows where you gotta like that kind of thing, cute girls doing cute things. I guess this would be like cute girls riding around on motorcycles. I don't know. I'll definitely give it a couple more episodes and see if it if it maintains a sort of level of humor and stuff. There's probably not much going on there. There's a show called Big Order, which hasn't premiered yet, that I'm probably going to watch. I don't remember why. I'm blanking right now on why. It has to do with who made it. Oh, I think it's the same people who made Future Diary, Mirai Nikki, which is why I kind of I marked it out to watch, but it hasn't premiered yet, so nothing about that. Next one is My Hero Academia. Really, really like that premiere. Sort of reminds me of One Punch Man, which was a show that had a lot of crossover appeal a couple seasons ago, and a little bit of Hunter x Hunter. Superhero world, different kind of tiers of superheroes. I'm a big fan of Studio Bones, which has 3 big projects going on simultaneously this season. And we'll see if they can maintain their general quality. I thought it had some really good animation, some good character designs and stuff. It's based on a sort of a popular, I think, manga. And it's about a like I said, it's a world where most people have a superpower of some sort, but our main protagonist, who's a huge fan of superheroism and whatever, he's a rare case of someone who doesn't have one of these. They're called quirks. That's the word that they chose in the subtitles. He doesn't have one of these. But he's very driven to be like a superhero. And I don't know if he eventually gets one or not. We'll see. But yeah, colorful, funny, has some good action, some good superhero action. And I just like these franchises that have like a million different superheroes and they all have their own powers. And there's these hierarchies of organizations. Like I said, One Punch Man, good example of that. Hunter x Hunter, good example of that as well. The second season of Concrete Revolution, Chojigen Genso, superhuman phantasmagoria. Also, another Bones show. I really, really like the first season of this show. It's completely bananas. It's like they threw everything together. It has superheroes and it has aliens and it has witchcraft and it has time travel and it's all just piled on top of each other. And yet it's actually a really sober, interesting, layered view about politics and society. It's very Japanese. There's a lot of stuff. I read a couple of people who blog about it and do a lot of legwork to kind of figure out what things in the history of Japan it's trying to reference, which is very interesting. So yeah, sometimes some of the nuance might be lost on Western viewers, but I think that it's really cool, and I really like when an anime has appears to be something, but actually has more depth to it. This is a really, really good example of that, and it's about the Superhuman Bureau, which is a government organization that's tasked with defending superheroes, or it's actually like supernatural beings, which is like an umbrella term for people who have superpowers and who are aliens, or maybe there's a witch and there's a demon and there's all kinds of, like I said, weird shit that's like piled on top of each other. It's very colorful. It's very interesting. It's very complicated. You got to really pay attention. It also jumps around. It's non-linear. It takes place in different time periods. Like a few years in the future, a few years in the past. It keeps jumping back and forth. So you got to pay close attention. But just a really fun show, and the premiere was really good. I think I'm going to go back and try to shotgun the first season again because it really is a lot to digest, and I don't remember all of the little details and who was on whose side, and people switch sides. It's very, like I said, there's a lot going on. Next show is the third Bones show for this season, Bungo Stray Dogs. Now, I didn't love the premiere of this. It's getting a lot of hype. It looks good. It has some good voice actors, some good character designs. It just didn't really grab me. It's a concept that happens a lot. It's about a guy and he falls in with this group of people who are supernatural, and I guess it has some kind of weird literary connection where each of them has a superpower that's based on some kind of like a famous past author. Some of them are Eastern, some of them are Western. Once again, I think some of the context may have been lost on me. And I got to go do a little reading on that. But I mean, it wasn't bad. It was perfectly serviceable. I just need to watch a couple more and see what the point of it is going to be. The opening sequence kind of teases things that make it look interesting. This first episode was just a very standard mini protagonist arc. Guy who's just a regular, every man or whatever figures out or kind of has a chance encounter with this organization that's sort of supernatural and investigate supernatural things, and he's actually more connected to that world than he first realizes. I'm not gonna I'm not going to really spoil it. So you should probably watch it if that interests you. You could, if I were you, I would check out maybe previews for all of these things if you're thinking about it. I always think that almost anything, except if it's something that you're clearly not going to be interested in. If you don't like idle anime, then obviously an idle anime is not something you're going to check out. But if something's in your general wheelhouse, just give it one episode. It's like 20 minutes of your life. You either like it or you don't. Or even, you don't even have to watch the whole episode. It's happened to me before. I've put on a premiere and like 10 minutes in, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to like this. So you just throw it aside. Who cares? Yeah, I think a good example of that might be Endride, my next entry, which is a show that I, just popped on and wasn't really like. I watched the first episode. I don't know if I'm gonna stick with it. It's about a kid who gets pulled into some kind of fantasy world, and it has some kind of crystal thing to it. I don't know. Not particularly feeling it. Not anything really special. Next up, Joker Game, which is a show that it made me a little uncomfortable because it's a show about pre-World War II Imperial Japan and their establishment of like a spy, kind of like a spy agency. It's if you've seen the movie Kingsman, it seems like it's a little bit like that, but like less absurd, like more serious, like training people to be infiltrators and it seems to be all about like double crossing and playing mind games with people and stuff. And it was fine. The only uncomfortable factor that I had from it was the implication that it might have a little bit of like, politics in it that might be a little weird to people in America. But we'll see. It looks pretty cool. It's kind of historical and it's an espionage. It's a setting that's atypical. I don't think I've ever seen a show set in this period and be like non-supernatural, just a straight out like military espionage show of the interwar period in Japan. The premiere episode kind of cut off right in the middle of the plot, so I can't really tell you. Like, I still don't really know what the ultimate point of this first arc is going to be because it kind of ended on a cliffhanger. But yeah, it's basically about this group of people who were recruited by the Japanese government to be these like super spies and maybe go to other countries and just sort of infiltrate them and then feed the Japanese government information about them, about these countries. Production IG made this show. Android, I don't remember who made it. It doesn't matter. But yes, Production IG show looks pretty good. Visually, I mean. But I think it's not going to be one of those like crazy like Sakuga battles or whatever. It's going to probably be more about visual presentation and how certain things are played out in the visual format. So that'll be interesting. Now I'm gonna skip over a couple of entries because I want to discuss these last, and gonna go to another show that hasn't aired yet, Kuromukuro, which is like some kind of mecha show. I think it's by JC Staff, possibly. Still hasn't aired, so whatever, nothing to say about that. So next one up is Mayoiga, which I believe is called The Lost Village in English. And it's a Marie Okada show. She's a good writer. I really enjoy her work. This show is weird, and also, actually, I've seen 2 episodes of this so far because it airs on Saturdays. So there's already episode 2's already out. I still don't understand exactly what it's about. It's ostensibly about 30 people who are going to this village that's hidden and is not on any maps. They're going to go start a new life in this village. That's kind of like an urban legend. And apparently these people, it starts with them on a bus because they all kind of figured out some kind of code on some website that then let them sign up for this trip to go to this village and abandon their old lives behind. And it's, there's hints of the supernatural, but you're not sure. It looks like it's kind of faking us out on whether or not there's anything supernatural or not in it. The characters are all kind of weirdos. It's unclear. I still don't know what to think about this show. As I said, I like Marie Okada a lot, and there were clues in it that it might be good, but I really don't. It's still... I have a feeling that the next episode, because it's fairly common for episode 3 to have some kind of, like sharp left turn. Happens quite a bit in a bunch of shows, especially ones that kind of try to fake you out with what the show is about. So I'm still sort of, I'm riding this out to see where it goes. It still hasn't really, played its cards yet. So yeah, I don't know. Next one up was a show I wasn't even going to watch, but it's made by Studio White Fox, which is a really solid, newish anime studio. They made Steins Gate and they made Akame ga Kill. They also made a couple of shows that were not really in my wheelhouse, like Is the Order a Rabbit, Gochumon wa Usagi desu ka, and also the Super Sonico anime. But their stuff... Oh, they also made, of course, Katanagatari, which is a really, really good show. Possibly one of the best looking anime ever, I think. Just amazing character design, super original, just beautiful, beautiful anime. If you can find it, I don't know where it's airing, and it's out of print. It's not easy to get a hold of, but it's just terrific. But this show is called ReZero. It has some long title because it's based on a light novel, and as we all know, light novels have obnoxiously long titles. And that's the main reason I wasn't really, like, I skipped right over it, is because it's based on a light novel, and light novels are typically my least favorite source material for anime, which might be unfair. I mean, it's because, I obviously have seen a light novel based anime that's good. It certainly happens. Plus, other source material, which I consider good, also has shit anime, like Original, which I like a lot, and also visual novels and manga and even like proper novels and games. They all have good and bad. Just something about light novels, especially lately, you see something that's like fantasy. You see like, oh, it's a fantasy world and it's it's a light novel. You're just like, ugh. You almost always kind of anticipate that it's going to be shitty. But I said, you know what? It's White Fox. I'll give it a try. And it actually had a double episode premiere, and it was really cool. And there's really not much that I can say without mildly spoiling it. So I'll say this. You can skip ahead 10 seconds, or you could just pause this and go watch the fucking thing. It's kind of like Live, Die, Repeat in an anime fantasy world. Something like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of self-aware. It's kind of sweet, and it's interesting. Also kind of fake outy, because at first you're like, oh, this looks kind of silly and whatever, but then it takes kind of a sobering turn, and then it has a kind of a twist on top of that. So I'm very interested to see where this goes, whether or not it's going to focus entirely on the story that they established in these first 2 episodes, or whether or not this is just the first arc and it'll go beyond that. In either case, I think there's a lot of room to do some really, really cool things here. And so now I'm going to talk about the 2 premieres that I was most impressed by. At first, I thought My Hero Academia was going to be the best premiere I was going to see all season, but then along came these 2 next shows that I'm going to discuss, and just really, really impressed me. Oh, by the way, I also saw Space Patrol Ruruko, which is the Trigger short by Imaishi. It's like the guy who made Kill la Kill and that kind of stuff. It's very cute. I don't really watch shorts. I'm probably going to keep watching this just because it's kind of silly and fun. But yeah, space, whatever. It's about a little girl. She lives in a town that has aliens, and she gets recruited to the Space Patrol, which is like a space police force. But it's like a 5-minute, one of those 5-minute anime. So yeah, anyway, And speaking of Trigger, the first of the two shows I'll discuss right now is Kizanever, which is the new Trigger show. And finally, at long last, it looks like Trigger are making another good show. Because Trigger came out of the gate with Kill la Kill, and people just really impressed people. Really impressed me. I really liked Kill la Kill. I know it wasn't perfect, and I know some people had some problems with it, and there's various complaints about it. I found it to be extremely memorable, very fun. I feel like it's, I still see lots of fan art for it, whereas other shows that were, as hyped, if not more hyped, kind of fade into the background. I still see a lot of Kill la Kill stuff around. It was funny. It was fun. It was, I think memorable is the best way to describe it. There's just everything about it is very, very distinct. And so people were saying like, oh, Trigger, Powerhouse Trigger is going to save anime and whatever. And then they just made a string of like really bad decisions as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what was behind it, but after that we got stuff like Inobattle, which was just nothing. And then we had like, Inferno Cop, which was a sort of a joke, and then Ninja Slayer, which was a joke, and was there even anything else that they did? You see, my point is they didn't follow it up with like a 1-2 punch. They didn't make something else that was like amazing. And in this Space Patrol Luruko, when it was first announced, people were like, oh, this might be, and then it's a short, so whatever, it's not a big deal. But here comes Kizanever, which is also written by Marie Okada, by the way, the one who wrote My Oiga, and she's like I said, a really good writer. And the first episode of that was just really, really solid, I thought. Reminded me a little of Mikaku City Actors. I said before I was going to get back to it, so here's me getting back to it. It has a little bit of that vibe. It has a little bit of that different sort of archetypal characters who come together for something. Again, I don't really want to tell you what these shows are about. I think it's fun to kind of experience it on your own. But I will say this, the character designs are really solid. The plot feels like it has some heft to it. And the story feels like it's going to be cool, and it's sort of supernatural and interesting, and it's also an original anime. It's not based on any source material, I believe. I'm pretty sure. And yeah, has some really good animation. Had a couple of cuts that just really, really impressed me. Yeah, just really, really pretty cool. And it's about a group of very, very different kids who are brought together and made to become connected in some way. It's still, it's just one episode in, so even I'm not really sure what the point of all this is. But yeah, like I said, like really, really solid in terms of style, and also very promising in terms of the plot of it. And now the very last show that I'm going to discuss, and then I guess I'm kind of wrap up things with this review of the 2016 spring anime season, is Iron Fortress Kabanari, Ko Tetsujo, I believe, Kabanari, which is also the first show that's exclusively streaming on Amazon Instant Video. They're also throwing their hat in the ring of like exclusively licensing anime. The anime wars are heating up, ladies and gentlemen. Dimension W, which was made, Funimation, I think, was in the creative committee for that. Now we got Toonami bought the rights to make new seasons of Fooly Cooly, which is a legendarily popular anime that's kind of short and just genius. And they're making new seasons of it. And we got Netflix making a show called I forget the name, but they're actually producing it as well, and fighting. The companies are now fighting them. There's bidding wars about who's going to stream what. So now Amazon is obviously entering this fray, and which I think is a good sign. It just means that there's money to be made in this. If they're trying to throw their weight around, because Amazon and Netflix are really heavy hitters, especially Amazon. which is one of the three like richest companies in tech. Essentially, you got your Google, you got your Facebook, and you got your Amazon, and they're basically the three biggest players in tech, I think, in terms of like how much money they have to throw at stuff. So if they're going out and exclusively licensing anime to stream, especially a high profile anime like the one I'm gonna discuss, Cabaneri, it means that they see a sort of value in it. So they're streaming this show. I think this show might have a lot of crossover appeal as well because it's very much a clone of Attack on Titan. It's made by Studio Wit, which made Attack on Titan. It's made by the same creative team. It's very much a clone in its kind of story and its style. Attack on Titan, based on a very popular manga by Hajime Isayama. This one is an original concept, which I'm going to discuss in a second. Clones are often lesser products. This does not look like it's a lesser product. In fact, I think it has the potential to surpass Attack on Titan, which I thought was okay. Wasn't bad. It had some really good stuff in it. It had a couple of episodes that I thought were like super, super powerful. But I think Attack on Titan's biggest problem was that it was hobbled by its source material. It's based on a manga. It followed the manga pretty closely as far as I know. But that meant that it was very slow. The plot didn't really go anywhere, and it ended like super, super open-ended. This doesn't have that problem. They can do whatever they want, and I think that'll actually be a good thing. So Iron Fortress Cabaneri, it's like Attack on Titan, except it's more steampunk. It has trains. Instead of giants, it has like these zombies. They're called the Kabane, which I believe is sort of a Japanesey kind of like corpse. They're like these animated corpses that are incredibly hard to kill. And the people live in like these enclosed train stations, and they take these armored trains that are called the Kotetsujo, the Iron Fortresses. And it's kind of like Snowpiercer type trains. They're super, super armored, and they have like these kind of steampunk rigs that they use to fight these kabane. And again, just a gorgeous, gorgeous show. I mean, every single shot in that first episode is just a feast for the eyes. I mean, Titan was kind of like that too, and then the quality kind of tapered off pretty dramatically, and then I think they kind of fixed it up in the Blu-ray versions. But when it was airing, a bunch of Titan episodes were really, really rough when they aired, and people are hoping that doesn't happen here. But yeah, just a really, really beautiful, weird future steampunk / Japanesey yukatas and kind of somewhat feudal social structure. I thought it was super solid, really violent, very surprised, and it's also on Amazon. It's not coming off like I don't know, maybe if people are downloading it and watching it off of like Japanese broadcast TV, I'm not sure what channel it's on. It might be more censored. I was very surprised. Lots of blood, lots of zombies, like, biting people's jugulars and just like spurts of blood everywhere. I thought it had a really good like double protagonist setup where they're very different in their approaches and their styles, and they're both very cool, but for different reasons. You got your guy who's like a super driven, very angry, very sort of intense inventor, and then you got your stoic ninja girl who's just like very detached and sort of has this killer instinct and nothing seems to bother her. Very, very interested in that show. As I said, when people saw the visuals and saw the previews, they were like, oh, here we go. It's the, Studio Wit's just making another Attack on Titan. And yet it really feels interesting. The world building I thought was really cool. As I said in the beginning of this, when I was discussing Rogue One, just make it good. Who cares if it's a clone? Who cares if it has some stuff that's really, really reminiscent of the imagery and the gear, the 3D maneuver gear from Titan has sort of an equivalent here, which is kind of these packs that go on the small ear back, and they kind of power the steam powered weapons that they use, like like high pressure or whatever. Who cares? You know what? If it's good, if it's awesome, I'm all for it. I think I think it could be a really, really strong show. It just has to not go off the rails. Original anime sometimes has a problem where they don't really know what they kind of lose steam. Look at me with my puns. Kind of lose steam like halfway through. It's like they have 6 really good episode ideas, and then they don't know what to do with the other 6. Good example of that, Kekai Sensen, even though that's based on a manga, Blood Battlefront Blockade, which was also a Bones show. Kind of reminded me of Bungo Stray Dogs, by the way. The problem with that show was it had a really, really strong like world building and characters and stuff, and then it fucked around for like 2 or 3 episodes too much, and then the actual plot was very rushed and very scatterbrained. I thought Dimension W handled that whole concept way better, where it had 12 episodes, didn't really fuck around at all, mostly focused on getting to the plot, explaining the plot. It was still a little weird at the end, but I thought it was way less scatterbrainy than other anime that feel the need to give you 2 or 3 episodes that are totally non-plot centric. Kekai Sensen had a whole episode about them going around and eating various foods in New York, and I was like, why do you need a whole episode for this? And then at the end, you're like, you explain the whole plot in like 2 minutes, where you could have just devoted an entire episode for it. Don't understand when they do that. But as I've said before, the process of making anime is a little bit opaque to me. I don't really understand the anime production world, so I don't know how the decision-making process works in that field. But yeah, there you have it. A bunch of really strong, I can kind of tally it, but like I said, at least 3 shows that I was like really impressed by. If 4, if you include Concrete Revolution, but that's a sequel. Also ReZero, so maybe even 5 shows that I think have a potential to be really strong, and then 2 or 3 others that could go either way. But yeah, really sort of dense, packed season. And like I said, that's even without JoJo, which everyone is watching, and a couple other things that I'm probably not going to check out, but other people will. Some comedies, Sakamoto, and other things that I don't know if I'm going to watch. I don't have an infinite amount of time. I'm also studying Japanese, which is a time-consuming endeavor, and also doing this shit and stuff. So, I can't watch everything. I might sometimes I mark stuff and then I go and I watch. I blast through like 12 episodes in a couple of days after the season's over. I might do that with some stuff. And on that note, I think I'm gonna wrap things up for this week. I think, like I said, I'm pretty sure next week I'm not going to be doing this. I might. I think it depends on whether or not some crazy stuff's going to happen. I think we're getting a Doctor Strange trailer on Tuesday. And if that happens, I might be unable to resist, and I might do a quick one. I have to travel to another state on next Sunday, so I don't know if I'm going to have time, but as I said, Doctor Strange trailer might be worth it for me to do some other stuff. Oh, there's also press screenings of Civil War have started, and the buzz is really, really strong. I've actually seen a few disappointed reactions to, which I actually think is good. It just means that the reactions that you see are not just a bunch of fanboys, because after Batman v Superman had some of these screenings, everyone was like, it's a powerhouse, it's Oscar worthy and whatever. And as we all know, it was none of those things. So seeing a slightly more down to earth spectrum of comments on something makes the praise feel like it's more honest and less fanboyish. So if somebody says this movie was awesome except for this and this and this, that to me feels way better than if somebody says like, this movie was flawless. But yeah, basically we've already heard some early reviews, and now there's some more early reactions on Twitter. Some movie reviewers and stuff are now getting to see it and are saying that it's really, really quite strong. They're comparing it to Batman v Superman. Many people, because it has that same like versus, like good guys against good guys thing, and they're also saying that it's a very dense and has a lot of different plot lines and mini plot lines going on in the same sense, but they're saying that it just deals with that better and just kind of does a better job of like balancing, juggling all of those different things well. So we'll see. So I mean, you might hear my voice next week, and if not, in a couple of weeks, which will put us quite close to civil war. So I would also expect a coming review of that in the near future. So that was this week's Neoncast. I am at Neon Taster. The podcast can be found at the Twitter account at Neoncast, and also the Gmail box neoncastpod at gmail.com. So tweet me, email me, let me know if you want me to talk about something, if you have some kind of comments about what I said. So yeah, subscribe it, share it, do whatever, tell your friends, put on a pasteboard and go out on the street with a bell and get people to listen. I don't know. Yeah, so thanks for listening, if you have been listening. And if not, then why am I talking to you?